and welcome, dear friends, to the second presentation in this 16th year of the Turner Winter Series. I'm Maureen Rovegno, proud and grateful to serve as Director for Religion at Chautauqua Institution, and grateful to have been associated with the Turner Winter Series for these many years. We begin today's presentation, traditionally held over the years at Chautauqua, with great appreciation to be here this year in the socially distancing capacity of the Kappa Theater in the Robert H. Jackson Center, as we are coming to you now virtually in a format to which we have all become quite accustomed in this time of COVID. It is my great pleasure to begin today's conversation with a brief introduction of our guest, Randall Perry, after which I will turn the conversation over to our perennial host and the founder of this series, Jamestown's and the Jackson Center's own Greg Peterson. Randall Perry is the Executive Director of the Chautauqua Lake and Watershed Management Alliance. He works on a variety of lake, watershed, and research initiatives in vibrant partnership with Alliance members and other stakeholders committed to protecting and enhancing the health and usability of our Chautauqua Lake. Prior to beginning his tenure as the Executive Director in late 2020, since 2016, Randall had worked as the Alliance's project manager. Before joining the Alliance, he had served as an adjunct instructor at Fredonia State University of New York, teaching geoscience and environmental science courses with a focus on water resources, geochemistry, surficial processes, and environmental assessment. Before that, he worked as a geological consultant, specializing in environmental and water resources projects. Randall is a native of Maine. He earned his Bachelor and Master of Science degrees in Earth Sciences from the University of Maine, with a focus on environmental geochemistry. We are delighted that Randall has now made his home here in our part of the country, now blessed by his passion and expertise, and we are so pleased that he's here with us today to share his extensive knowledge and love for what he does. It is now my pleasure to welcome Greg and Randall.
Thank you, Maureen. Just a news note for those who are watching this, 2 weeks from now, we will be having Mark Geis, the Administrative Director of the County of Chautauqua Industrial Development Agency, here to talk about the topic of earth, wind, and solar. Can't wait. And today we're talking a little bit about Chautauqua Lake and watershed management. Now, Randall, you're from Maine. You're a native of Maine, and you went to Maine University. And I did a little research. And I've ascertained that the University of Maine, as late as 2018, was designated as one of the preeminent party schools in the United States. Can you confirm that?
Had a wonderful academic program. That's all I can confirm, Greg.
So you're a native of Maine, whereabouts?
Northern Maine, Aroostook County, little town called Masardis.
Now, where's that in connection to, like, Lewiston, Maine? Is that nearby?
No, it's not nearby. Everything's relative. But, up in Aroostook County, we were roughly straddling the dividing line between the forests of the North Maine woods to the west and the potato country of the eastern portion of the state to the east. And Lewiston probably would have been about 3.5 hours by way of our wonderful highway system.
So you're not going to give me some deep, dark secrets of the Muhammad Ali, Sonny Liston fight in Lewiston, Maine, which I spent a lot of time listening to when I was a kid.
I can't confirm those sorts of details, but I know that Lewiston and Auburn has a rich history of a variety of things, and I came in, my time here on Earth was coming in more towards the tail end of that, but they're looking towards a brighter future. So.
Yeah. Speaking of coming into this Earth, obviously a mother and dad, and your dad was in the forestry business, wasn't he?
That's right. He was a forester up in the North Maine woods from the 70s through retirement. So.
How did he get into that? What was your grandparents? Was that something that's part of your lineage?
Well, my folks came to Maine from Massachusetts. My father as a Massachusetts native and my mother by way of New Jersey. They were both big into agriculture and my dad forestry. The North Maine woods provided them an opportunity to combine those passions. So my dad went to work in the woods and they started a farm up in the county raising sheep. And then that's where we made our home for the last, well, nearly 40 years for myself. My mom went back into teaching, and she's been doing that ever since as well. But the farm is still there, but it's much less populated with animals. But it's still an enjoyable place to be.
So you're right there, physically located in the northwest area where there's timber and stuff. Were you drawn to that? Is that something that you and your dad go out in the woods, identify the trees, and forest management? Was that part of your world?
My dad was, whether it was by way of training or by way of he needed to go do something and we were around, he'd take us out there, and we enjoyed many a visit to his work areas in the woods. Probably didn't learn as much about the forestry, tree identification as he maybe would have liked, but we had a lot of good times, my brothers and I both, and it was a wonderful way to connect, not just with the outdoors, but with my dad as well. And we still go out sometimes, and he'll go back to his old stomping grounds and take grandkids and things like that. So it's been a really nice way to connect with him in somewhere that's a really beautiful place to connect.
Was timber stand improvement part of his job out there, so that erosion and control and making sure the right trees were being adapted to? Was that part of his world?
Well, the company he worked for, certainly one of their big priorities was sustainable forestry. So identifying the right resources to manage, both for extraction for natural resource industry, but also for preservation of a healthy plots of forest for future generations to enjoy and utilize for the economy up there.
So this was natural for you to literally graduate from high school and to find yourself at the University of Maine, and the Black Bears, by the way. Go Black Bears. And Stephen King, by the way, was one of your alums, right?
I've been told I lived in the dorm where he once made residence.
So Stephen King and Randall Perry, those are the two big names out of here?
That's pretty much the list, yeah.
Okay. This is important stuff. So earth sciences, therefore, was a natural major for you coming from where you came from?
Well, the geology piece was new. My older brother preceded me at UMaine, and we overlapped, and that's one of the ways that I got into that field was he had already plowed the road a bit, and it was a nice way to again overlap family with education and profession. So there was just a great program with a lot of really strong faculty, but also faculty who cared about not just your development and your process as a student, but as a person as well. And still to this day, it's a wonderful department. And that was one of the biggest draws was, getting me in the door was largely, as with many students, it's easy to start a major, but to enjoy it and to see it through to the end, that was a big part to do with the people in that department. My advisors for my master's program, Steve Norton and Peter Coons, they were outstanding mentors, along with a whole list of other faculty members there. So it's really just presented a wonderful place to call home for a handful of years as I worked my way down the state.
So I'm a young student, and I want to get involved in the earth science with a focus on environmental geochemistry. So I come in to Professor Perry, and I say, Professor, can you explain to me what environmental geochemistry is and why I should be part of this?
Well, certainly geochemistry is a very broad discipline. I focused on the near surface, so the low temperature, low pressure, which is just a fancy way of saying the surface of the earth and normal conditions where humans live. Environmental geochemistry, had a lot of appeal to me, and I would certainly share this with any young person considering it as a profession or as a discipline. The things we rely on as people here on this earth, understanding where they come from, where they go, and the various interactions and processes that occur as it makes its way through the world is a really important skill set. So certainly the allure of having marketable skills, I think, is important. But also for those who are looking at it more for an appreciation of, where do the minerals and other constituents of our cell phones or our other electronic devices come from? Where does the water, when I turn on my tap, where is that coming from? What's in it? How did it get there? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it inert? If I have something in my water, what could I do to get rid of it if I chose to do that? So there was just so many different directions one can go in that discipline that it really appealed to me, and it still does.
So you graduated from the University of Maine, you earned your BS, and you got your master's there. What year did you graduate?
I graduated with my master's in 2010.
So 2010, then you have to...
2009, sorry.
2009, then you
Don't
have
check
to...
my transcript.
You look in the mirror and say, now what? And how did you make the decision of the next move? You get your master's, your mom and dad are happy for you. God bless Randall Perry. Where did you go from there?
Well, I as with many students, both in the 2009 timeframe, as is probably the case today, there was challenges in terms of employment opportunities. I loved Maine. It's where I grew up. It's where I'd spent the majority of my young adulthood. But the types of skills that I wanted to employ opened up a variety of avenues in terms of where in the world, or where in the country at least, one may find gainful employment. I did some smaller part-time work, again through that network of faculty at University of Maine, provided me some opportunities, caught on with some part-time work in a couple of consulting firms, putting things together, putting experiences together, and then found the right fit in Southern Maine. There was a consulting firm that was looking to hire a person of my discipline, and it worked out as a great fit, and it was a wonderful about 4 or 5 years with them down in the Portland area that not only let me work in Maine, I got to travel almost all over the state doing projects, but even as far out west to the Nevada desert and New York City and places like that where work was being done. So it was just a wonderful opportunity to start a young career.
It seems logical when you're in the geochemical business that Nevada and New York City, that goes glove in hand. It makes perfect sense.
Well, you have to expand your horizons. It's not just the natural world, it's the things we build within it that can yield marketable opportunities.
So you're still working as a consultant and ultimately find yourself into the public sector. You go from private to a public sector. How did that transpire?
My lovely wife, she in her career, she's a biologist by trade, PhD. We met at UMaine, but her career path brought her to Fredonia, New York. Identified a wonderful opportunity to join the faculty there, where she remains. In 2014, we moved out, and the move was significant in terms of my trajectory, and but that's what brought us out here, and did some work at the university here in Fredonia, doing some adjunct instructing, which I enjoyed greatly. Got to mix my background with, I do enjoy education and trying to help students the way that I was once helped, until 2016, when this opportunity arose to join the Alliance down here in Jamestown.
So you became project manager for the Chautauqua Lake and Watershed Management Alliance. And I think for those who maybe haven't tuned in the last few years on our various some seminars on that alliance. Could you explain what that is?
Sure. So we're a 501c3 designated non-for-profit organization. It was established in late 2014. It evolved from what was known as the Chautauqua Lake Management Commission, which had been active since the early part of the 2000s. It really came into form in 2015 when it established its first staff and permanent board. Our mission is to it's a variety of things, all aimed towards the improvement and the protection of the health and the usability of Chautauqua Lake. We work collaboratively with our members and other stakeholders. So our members are primarily municipalities, lake and watershed organizations, fellow nonprofits, the County of Chautauqua, the Chautauqua Institution, and other organizations that all have a stake in Chautauqua Lake. And so we work together with those members, other stakeholders, to help coordinate and facilitate projects, help prioritize projects, help to secure and allocate funding, and also to secure and allocate funding from New York State and elsewhere outside of the county to perform work all aimed at increasing that health and usability of Chautauqua Lake.
So within it, you're now the executive director, having succeeded Vince Horrigan. For those who may have seen last year, Vince was here with others. You have a board of directors of 9, which consists of 2 members from the county, 3 members from the lake the municipalities around the lake, and 4 at-large members, 3 staff people. And you have committees which cover the principal focus of your organization. You got lake management, you have watershed management, and something new, scientific review and advisory committee. Could you talk about those 3 kind of missions?
Sure. So just a point of clarification, the science committee was succeeded by something that's now known as the Data Analysis and Research Committee. So we still have that 3-committee structure, and I apologize, that was current at the time those slides were prepared. But so our Lake Management Committee, our Watershed Management Committee, and our Data Analysis and Research Committee, they all serve, they're all compiled of similar groups and in some cases individuals. The Lake Management Committee is largely utilized in a coordinated, a convening and a coordination type focus to bring municipal leaders, lake organizations together to help to coordinate the work that's going on in the lake. So for instance, we'll be looking to convene our first meeting of this year for the Lake Committee to help identify, looking back to 2020, but also looking ahead to 2021 and seeing which municipalities, what are the goals and priorities of each municipality, each lake organization? What are the current known resources that we're aware of that are queued up for deployment in 2021? How can those resources gain maximum alignment with the needs and the priorities of the lake users as they're represented by those municipalities? The Watershed Management Committee, that committee is largely tasked with helping to identify future watershed projects to identify grant opportunities for implementation. So things like there's representatives from highway departments, village and town levels, the county, Department of Public Facilities, identifying those different opportunities. Again, priorities and goals of each individual member coming together to try to see where's there some overlap, where's there's opportunities for partnerships and collaboration, and also looking back on work that's been done and work that's needed in the future. The Data Analysis and Research Committee, that was initiated this past summer, and we're very excited by this committee. It's got a variety of very, very qualified researchers, scientists, engineers, folks trained in data analysis. We've got a really nice cross-section of members on that committee, and one of the primary tasks for this committee has been to, Chautauqua is a great place in that there's so much interest and so much dedication that it means that there's a lot of work that goes on that creates data sets, reports, a lot of scientific and technical information on a year-to-year basis. So bringing all that into this committee to try to help understand, well, where are there still the most critical data and information gaps? How could those data and information gaps be filled? What's the sort of triage approach of research and data collection that would be most beneficial to the lake? So those committees do a lot, and I only touched on a few of the highlights, but we certainly appreciate the time because they're volunteers. They're people that come from they're town supervisors, village mayors, council members, professors at universities, and they're coming to do work on behalf of Chautauqua Lake because they care. So certainly appreciate that.
So you set up a meeting soon, and members of the Lake Management Committee are sitting around in a circle, socially distant, or you do it on Zoom, and they want to know what happened. Give us a scorecard of 2020, Randall. Tell us. There were so many things that were going on, so many different initiatives, whether it was Bowling Green doing its stuff, or various hydraulic projects, or various weed control projects, herbicide. How do you report to them?
Well, that's a really good question. It's something that Taylor and I are actively working on in terms of setting that agenda up for this first meeting.
By the way, that was Taylor West.
Yes, Taylor West, our new project manager, so my coworker who's done a wonderful job stepping into that role, and he's an integral part of this team. So back to your question, one of the things we want to do is look back a bit on 2020 in order to figure out, well, what were the lessons learned? What were the areas that we can build upon to enhance programs through expansion or maybe adaptation? Certainly looking at the various components of a balanced lake management approach is important. So looking at the mechanical macrophyte management, the chemical macrophyte management, but then also the research and the data collection initiatives, figuring out how all three of those things will work together. 2020 was weird. We know that, but one of the interesting things for Chautauqua Lake was, we were blessed. I'll speak for myself, but we at the Alliance were blessed we were charged with this work to help maintain Chautauqua Lake at a time when Chautauqua Lake became probably a much more important thing in certain people's lives who were either here because they couldn't go anywhere else. They maybe had more time to recreate, more time to fish and enjoy the lake. Others who maybe came here for that same reason. So it really took on a increased level of meaning for us because it is such an important place, but maybe even more so in a year like this. 2020 we saw the introduction of several key initiatives. We started to deploy global positioning system, GPS technology, in the mechanical macrophyte management program. So the Chautauqua Lake Association and their great work that they do on the lake, harvesting and performing nearshore cleanup, we were able to equip. We were very generously provided a grant by the Chautauqua Region Community Foundation to initiate this GPS program, and that's been a game changer for lake maintenance to be able to begin to visualize not just in real time what's happening, because it's often easy to kind of remember what happened a week ago or a month ago, but when you start looking months down the road or even years down the road, it's wonderful to have that spatial data in archive to know this is the work that was done during 2020, exactly when, where, and to what extent that work was being performed. MobiTrack, so the town of Chautauqua was in year 2 basically of their MobiTrack program. We were able to help to expand that program through the purchase of a third amphibious vehicle utilized for nearshore cleanup. And they were also equipped with GPS technology. There was a new joint operations program between the town of Chautauqua and the CLA, the Chautauqua Lake Association, to utilize the CLA's major on-water capabilities with those kind of mechanized heavy lift capabilities in the nearshore environment that the Moby Tracks provided. So, looking back on those new successful collaborations, new data tracking, new data reporting, that'll be important to cue off of for 2021. The chemical management side, the municipalities, particularly those municipalities in the southern basin of the lake, they just completed year 4 basically of an incremental targeted herbicide program to help manage target non-native species, curly-leaf pondweed and Eurasian water milfoil. 2020 saw a single approach to target Eurasian water milfoil, about 86 acres, with a new herbicide that's called Perselicor. And it's been identified by the EPA as having a reduced risk capacity. It's got a much lower drinking water threshold. Actually, the dosage rates are quite a bit lower than the drinking water threshold, which sort of makes it an interesting option that the New York State DEC, through their permitting process, has identified as a potential option moving forward for Chautauqua Lake. So looking at that balanced approach, looking at how that balance might shake out in 2021, curly-leaf pondweed was especially thick this year in the early season. It has a relatively short run, but a very intense run from the May to June into early July timeframe. So one of the things for 2021 that we're looking at is with our members, is looking at ways to try to identify better ways to get at that issue early in the season to really set the tone for the rest of the year. So that's just kind of a snapshot of the types of things we hope to talk about. We've got other data collection capabilities. We've got some new acoustic biovolume technology that can help to get a rapid assessment of macrophyte abundance in the open water, in the littoral zone actually. So we're hoping to expand that program in coordination with these groups, try to see, here are the types of tools we have. What are your goals? What are your needs? How can we best align them? So those are some of the items that we'll definitely talk about.
One of the things that structurally the Chautauqua Lake and Watershed Alliance is the grouping of a source for funding. Our local foundations, which is extensive and keenly interested in things Chautauqua Lake related, have strategically used the alliance as a mechanism in which to prioritize grants out. And I think it's been the last few years where each organization, which may have its own priorities and own focuses, applies and prioritizes. Could you talk a little bit about that process and, who's some of the maybe first of all, who are some of the stakeholders who are funders of yours? And then how does the process work to get funding for specific projects?
Sure. The first thing that I want to, say is I wouldn't be sitting here and we wouldn't be having these types of conversations without the extreme generosity of our funding partners, the local foundations, the Chautauqua Region Community Foundation, the Lene Foundation, the Ralph C. Sheldon Foundation, the Holmberg Foundation, the Gebbe Foundation, and of course the County of Chautauqua as well. Certainly those that grouping is so vital to all of this because they've given us this awesome responsibility at the Alliance to be able to again try to cultivate and utilize those collaborative approaches to really try to get work towards a more comprehensive work plan on a year-to-year basis. And we'll be wrapping up soon our third such consolidated grant request, we call it. And we're very hopeful that we'll be having some very good news to share in the coming weeks, looking towards 2021. But in terms of the process, one of the things that we've worked to do, so to walk it back a few years, in 2018, the Alliance worked with a consultant to develop a 5-year implementation strategy for the management of Chautauqua Lake and its watershed. So that was sort of a two-pronged deliverable back in 2018. It was a strategy itself, which really sought to break out the various stakeholder opinions and perceptions and goals and priorities, and wrap it into a document that also took into account a common understanding of the natural system and the built systems that we live in. But second with that, parallel with that, was the development of a multi-criteria analysis tool, which is a decision-making tool that incorporates watershed and lake science with also stakeholder input, and puts it together in this weighted, prioritized kind of way to look at both lake projects and watershed projects, and try to identify them or try to compare them and rate them in a technical way. So that multi-criteria analysis tool has been kind of the backbone of this structured decision-making process for project review and prioritization. In 2020, we were very fortunate through a grant from the Sheldon Foundation to be able to update that multi-criteria analysis tool. So that's what we utilized in our most recent round of project solicitation and review and funding. So around summertime, we'll open up a request for applications, which will be open to all Alliance members to submit their applications for lake, watershed, or research projects. All those applications will be brought into the Alliance in the fall, and it'll go through a very detailed initial technical review process where we'll utilize committee members, Alliance staff, and also outside consultants to break out that technical scoring. So that initial technical scoring will then go to our Alliance Board of Directors. This is still in the fall. And the Alliance Board of Directors will ultimately develop, create, approve this slate of projects to advance for a funding request, consolidated and packaged and submitted to the participating foundations. So that's the way that this process has gone. We will then submit that consolidated request to the participating foundations, and depending on the decisions that those foundations make, we will then receive a grant at the Alliance, which we will then distribute to the members who have been identified for funding for that year. So we're looking at distributing funding soon for the 2021 work program, and we're very hopeful and very excited and very appreciative of the foundations for everything they've done and continue to do to help support this more coordinated effort. Again, trying to see the whole board a little bit more, rather than making decisions 2 or 3 times a year. So you might have some decisions to make in March, but then you may find out that in August you have some other projects that come along that you say, boy, I wish back in March I'd known about this one. So trying to get things set up a little earlier in the season in a more consolidated way, I think, is really starting to pay dividends in terms of again, that identification of available resources, and then that deployment of those resources by the members doing the projects in the lake and watershed.
In collaboration among the various stakeholders, members, organizations that are lake-related, they always didn't see eye to eye. There's some history here. In 2018, there was the Memorandum of Understanding that County Executive Barillo encouraged, and most members signed that. It was a 2-year Memorandum of Understanding, and part and parcel of that was a little bit of the strategy, funding-wise, that you just described, with the money going through the Chautauqua Lake Alliance, and then in terms they having a protocol. What's the status of the Memorandum of Understanding, if at all, and how you think things have progressed since 2018?
Yeah, so the Memorandum of Agreement was executed in the spring of 2019, had a 2-year term. So we are currently still under the term of that original MOA. The Alliance is a proud signer of that, and we've certainly embraced and attempted to promote the tenets of that MOA. Some of the key developments that the Alliance has been directly involved in, the use of GPS technology was one of the tenets identified in that MOA. Again, utilizing just the technology that we have at hand to try to improve the overall maintenance process. The utilization of third-party monitoring for certain macrophyte management practices. For instance, the herbicide program was identified in 2019 and again in 2020 to receive independent third-party monitoring by an outside firm that was coordinated by the Alliance. Those have been two really important developments. Certainly the long point delineation for herbicides in the South Basin has been something that's been important in terms of a tenet that's been in place for the last several years. As far as looking ahead, the county back in 2019 showed a lot of leadership to get this document into place, and we await, just as any other signatory awaits, kind of the next word from the county on what to look for moving forward. So.
There have been a number of studies which have gotten high publicity. Bowling Green State University and the Chautauqua Lake Partnership Nutrient Monitoring, the Racine Johnson and Chautauqua Lake Association Scientific Monitoring, and sometimes I don't want to say the press, but it'd be looking somewhat at the same data and come up with different conclusions would be a very layman's reaction. Is that reality, or is that just press hype?
Well, I think anytime you get a report in hand, it's important to look at what were the objectives of that undertaking. So in terms of the Bowling Green work, that's largely tied to looking at nutrients, both coming into the lake from the 14 major tributaries that surround it, and then also lake quantification of lake nutrients, so that phosphorus and that nitrogen that's dissolved in the water that can, and at times under the right conditions, fuel those algal blooms and also contribute to the macrophyte question as well. So that's more of a looking at harmful algal blooms and nutrients, that sort of stuff. What you might be referring to was back in late 2019, early 2020, there were some macrophyte specific surveys that were released at different times that to your point may have been perceived by some to come to some different conclusions, different interpretations of what to some people may have looked like similar types of data. Again, timing is very important. Objectives are very important. So I'll speak about the 2019 work by Princeton Hydro that was done in coordination with the Alliance. They looked at very discrete locations in the lake at very specific points in time, both pre-herbicide treatment and post-herbicide treatment. And they drew conclusions and made interpretations based on those data. The Racine Johnson work that's available through the Chautauqua Lake Association, different objectives, similar in terms of they were all looking at macrophytes, response, and characteristics, but they had different objectives. Certainly, they had different types of data sets. The Racine Johnson work for years has been really valuable because they look at, basically the entire littoral zone of the lake and describe the macrophyte communities, both, types of macrophytes present, abundances, things like herbivorous activity working against the Eurasian water milfoil with weevils and moths. They really bring a lot, mussels, a whole slate of really important work. But when work, anytime you broaden your scope, sometimes you can draw different conclusions when trying to look at the variables that you're seeing in play for a given year. So things like herbicide treatments, things like the natural kind of progression of algal blooms through the season, the natural progressions of macrophyte communities through the season. The broader you are, the longer period of time between your quote unquote pre and post data sets, that can affect the way you choose to interpret those data. And then we'll bring in solitude lake management, and then this year, 2020, Chautauqua Lake Partnership brought a new entity to the game. NC State brought some researchers up to do some macrophyte surveys as well. And again, different purposes, so sometimes different interpretations can come from that.
I read quite a bit about the Jefferson Project at Chautauqua Lake. Now, you've just talked about Bowling Green, you've talked about Princeton, Racine, Johnson. These are just names to most people. Where does the Jefferson Project fit into this?
Yeah, so of all those things we just talked about, certainly, in terms of similar arena, the Bowling Green work and the Jefferson Project work would be very closely aligned and very complementary to one another. The Jefferson Project was established at Lake George, out on the eastern end of the state. We had a wonderful opportunity this year in 2020 to partner with the Jefferson Project, which is a consortium of IBM Research, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and also the Fund for Lake George, all very major players on Lake George, and they've come together to create this Jefferson Project. They were looking for the opportunity to expand some of their world-class sensor technology, modeling technology, lake monitoring wherewithal to other lakes outside of Lake George. They successfully worked on Skinny Atlas Lake near the central part of the state, and they were looking for an opportunity to branch out to Chautauqua Lake. In terms of harmful algal blooms, those three lakes present a really interesting look at the spectrum of harmful algal blooms, Lake George being quite pristine, relatively speaking, Skinny Atlas being somewhere in the moderate portion of the spectrum, and then Chautauqua Lake, where we have significant harmful algal bloom issues based on the impairments of excessive nutrients being within the lake. So the opportunity came up in the summer of 2020 to initiate this first year of the Jefferson Project at Chautauqua Lake. We worked together with the institution for logistical support, housing, boats, just a huge amount of in-kind support from the institution. There were private donations to help fund this initial phase of the Jefferson Project here at Chautauqua Lake. The County of Chautauqua was a key player in helping to coordinate, and then the Alliance. And what we were able to do is the Jefferson Project was able to mobilize in August to bring a pair of vertical profilers out to the lake, and they were positioned, one in the North Basin and one in the South Basin. And what these vertical profilers are is they're a floating platform equipped with very, very high-end technology to monitor weather, currents in the lake, profiles of things like oxygen, pH, chloride concentrations, and a variety of other parameters. And they basically deploy a line down at a set period of time, 24/7, taking profiles, because that's the thing with lakes is, what you see at the surface isn't necessarily what's happening down below or anywhere in between, and it's the parts of the lake you don't necessarily see that can sometimes be the biggest drivers of some of the issues that you're seeing manifested in terms of algal blooms and things like that. So these two vertical profilers were deployed in August, and they stayed out there until November. And all the while, the Jefferson Project also deployed lake sampling teams on a biweekly basis from early September all the way through to October to go out and collect additional samples of algal communities, water quality, nutrients, a variety of other parameters. And since then, they've been feeding that data into their various programs that they've established over about 7 years worth of work at Lake George. They're already starting to create some circulation models for Chautauqua Lake, which could be real game changers, because when we talked about those data and information gaps, that's one of the big things. It may sound simple, but there are there are certain physical characteristics of our lake, in addition to the chemical characteristics that we don't know nearly enough about to really make good informed decisions in terms of understanding harmful algal blooms and then ultimately trying to predict and mitigate and prevent. So we're hopeful that program will be reinitiated for 2021. We're working with the partners to identify scope of work, budgets, things like that, to see what a good program for 2021 looks like, to build off that great first year, but also keep moving towards that. We're in the data and the interpretation, the early stages of modeling, but how do we continue to drive that uncertainty downward? How do we begin to incorporate things like getting a stronger understanding, incorporating scenario engines to try to identify what are the drivers, what things are happening at the same time with these harmful algal blooms. The nice thing too is, while harmful algal blooms are one of the prime directives of this work, there's so much that spins out of a better understanding of our lake. The macrophyte issues, sedimentation issues for recreation or for possible dredging, all those things can benefit from these strategic data and research initiatives that try to fill those most critical gaps in understanding and keep moving that. Uncertainty is never going to go away in the lake. There's always going to be uncertainty. It can only be reduced. It can never be eliminated. But figuring out the right places to attack that uncertainty through these partnerships, Bowling Green's work is extremely complementary. There's other work by SUNY Fredonia with a monitoring buoy in the lake. There's work to collect a lot of lake data by these researchers. And one of the wonderful things of the Data Analysis and Research Committee is we've got principals from several of those initiatives on that committee. Principals from the Jefferson Project have zoomed into our DAR committee, and we're really making sure that collaboration is up front and is a core focus of this, because good data and good research, it's expensive, and you got to make sure that you're stretching those dollars adequately and making sure that the work you're doing is a scaffolding approach and not just a scatter shot of research here and research there, but rather how does it all fit together. So getting the smart people together is one of the best ways to do that, is to get them talking. So.
You described a mechanism whereby there's significant amount of data being gathered with an eye towards understanding, more importantly, our two basined lakes. You've got the South Basin, which is different than the North Basin, with an eye towards hopefully a consensus building policy, and which will then lead to funding to attack those recommendations that come from that data gathering. Am I overstating that?
No, I think that's a really nice way of putting it.
So you're the hot shot. I mean, you are the executive director of the Chautauqua Lake Alliance. You're in the vortex of all this data gathering. You're in the vortex of the Chautauqua Lake aspect of it, the watershed management aspect of it. And you're asked to come to a meeting of realtors, business development people, and they want to create significant developments around the lake, or just buy property around the lake. and they're looking at the question, is this lake going to be, will the condition of this lake likely improve over the next 5 years? Is that a fair question, and is it even answerable?
Well, it's a fair question. It's a very tough one to answer. You know, it starts with the data. You know, it starts with but in the end, knowing what concentration of phosphorus you have at this spot in the lake or this spot in the lake, or what species of algae you have, those are all critical pieces of the overall picture. But when it comes to talking to people like, you know, economic development folks or realtors or oftentimes just an average person who might be interested in you know, that's one of those tough things to put your finger on. Is there an index? Is there some amalgamation of all this data and information that we can arrive at on a year-to-year basis and say, aha, the Peterson factor went up, or the Peterson factor went down, or it stayed the same? I mean, that would be a wonderful thing to work towards, but it's complicated because each user, each stakeholder, each use of the lake has a different measuring stick for what's healthy, what's impaired, what's improving, what's declining. You know, the wonderful thing about these, well, the thing about these problems is, while Chautauqua is unique, and we have a very unique history, as many places do, the problems we face, while specific to our lake, they're felt all over the country, all over the world. So there are ways to utilize work that's been done or is being done elsewhere to try to project, look at trajectories. You know, sometimes sometimes the growth in understanding outpaces the improvements that are achieved once that understanding is reached. You know, because these are significant endeavors, whether it's HAB mitigation or dredging or large-scale management projects. They're big investments, so making sure that you're aimed in the right direction before you invest is critical, and that can be frustrating to some people. And that patience factor is a tough one, because you don't want to let it be an excuse, but you also want to make sure you're clear that it's the responsible thing to do to try to figure out, as much, address as much of the uncertainty before you undertake something. Ecosystem valuations, economic valuations, those are really good tools for the types of audiences that you referenced. Things like, what types of plant species do you have? What types of aesthetic or recreational qualities does your lake possess? So, in terms of how to talk to that group, I think it's important to try to figure out what their priorities are and what does success look like to them, so that way you can try to look into, those archives of what you know and what you don't know, and try to figure out a way to work with them on helping them understand, so that way they can probably help their investors or their partners understand those types of things.
I know you've identified economic drivers, the Chautauqua Lake and its watershed: powerboating, kayaking, swimming, fishing, drinking water source, county property tax base, characteristics: 13,000 acre lake, 102,000 acre watershed. This is for Taylor, second best muskie fishing in New York, and improved walleye fishing, and I think most of them were outside of my house ice fishing here recently. Part and parcel of this, and it's a little bit of a segue, I'm not even sure there's a segue, but watershed management is that which flows into the lake. The nutrients which flow into the lake, which cause many of the things you're studying. And that is ultimately sewering, a question. I know that may or may not be in your bailiwick, but what's the status of the extension of the sewer work around Chautauqua Lake? For those who are listening, not all of Chautauqua Lake is sewered, and yet there is certainly progress on various parts of this. Can you give us kind of a thumbnail of where things might be?
Sure. So you're absolutely right that while the Alliance, several of our members are directly engaged in this work, the county, sewer districts, but the Alliance itself, a lot of our primary partner projects are more in the non-point source type watershed work. So these sewer and waste management, this would be those point sources in the watershed. Approximately 2/3 of our lake's shoreline is served by public sewers. That's been a monumental task over many decades, by the county's sewer agencies and leadership at a variety of levels. One of which being my board chairman, Pierre Chagnon, who I know you had a great interview with last winter. So approximately 2/3. So trying to address that remaining third is a big priority of these groups. When you look at public sewers, there's a couple of different ways that they're working the problem. Certainly the extension of sewer services to residences and businesses that are on either small sewer systems or septic systems, that's one piece, extending that sewer service. And there's a major west side sewer extension that's underway between Asheville and Stowe. So that's been a work over the course of several years. Currently, the design is complete and under regulatory review. So once that regulatory review is complete, the goal would be to go out for bids to actually start building it hopefully in 2021 with a projected time frame of probably 2 years for completion. Once phase one, that would be the Asheville to Stowe leg, once phase one is complete, there is a desire to turn to what's known as phase two, which would extend it further from Stowe up to the Prendergast fish hatchery, which would effectively put the entire west side of Chautauqua Lake on public sewer systems, which would be a huge accomplishment. On the north side, in terms of conveyance and in terms of the actual movement of the effluent, there was a small treatment plant that's been decommissioned that was in the town of Chautauqua. And since then, there's a new pumping station that, rather than treating that stuff there and discharging to the lake, as had been the past practice, that small package plant's been decommissioned. There's a pumping station that now conveys those flows up to the North Chautauqua Lake Sewer District treatment plant. So the extensions themselves are a big piece, and there's also plans to hopefully, with that initial work done, to also extend some of the service opportunities to some residences and businesses on the northeastern portion of the lake to get them some services as well. But that's still a little ways off. But the treatment plants themselves, the upgrades that have happened at the North Chautauqua Lake Sewer District wastewater treatment plant, the Chautauqua Utilities District wastewater treatment plant, and the South and Center Chautauqua Lake Sewer District treatment plant have done, they have drastically improved the phosphorus removal in the effluent. So it's not only about getting more properties onto public sewer, but it's also about making investments in those wastewater treatment plants to increase the treatment capacity, effectively continue to pull down that phosphorus load that's going into the lake. And they've done wonderful things over the last handful of years to improve that phosphorus removal at the treatment plants. And then, other things that are happening, the sewer districts themselves, even in places that have had public sewers for a long time, they're performing inflow and infiltration studies where they're going out and they're investigating the efficiency and the quality of their current collection system to try to decrease the amount of groundwater or other fresh water coming into their pipes, or potentially even, any impairments to the pipes can reduce efficiency, drive up treatment costs, because you're bringing fresh water to these treatment plants that doesn't need to be there. So the I&I work is also big. So it's not just about, laying more pipe. It's not just about improving your treatment plant. It's also about protecting and improving the efficiency of your current collection and conveyance system. And then lastly, the Chautauqua County Department of Health has been performing septic inspections for certain locations to address either aged or non-permitted septic systems, underperforming septic systems, and also prioritizing the improvement or replacement of systems that are not slated to get public sewers in the near future. So trying to be reasonable about that, because if somebody's about to get an extension, they don't want to force them to put in a new, system with a 30-year lifespan on it if they're about to get public sewer. So it's a lot of moving parts, and it's a lot of leadership and a lot of hard work by the county's districts to make it happen, and their engineers and the state and the federal regulators, they're all working together. So
Your knowledge is encyclopedic here, Randall. So I'm Pierre Shagnon. I'm the big guy. I'm the boss. And I'm sitting here in the chair and I'm saying, Randall, you did a really great job, but you forgot to mention something. What is it that Pierre would say that you may, in our presentation here, that maybe I forgot to ask you or Pierre would like you to mention?
Do you have an earpiece? Is he in your ear? Well, I think anytime we sit and we have these types of discussions, it's inevitable that I've forgotten something or someone, and to that someone, I apologize. But we've got so many critical partners in this. Our members. I wish I could sit here and give you a rundown of every accomplishment that each member had in 2020. I'd leave somebody out. I think that we talk a lot about unity and core competencies and really trying to work together towards a common goal. But, there's so many examples of things that you could give that, settling on any one thing is probably too much, but.
So if Pierre said, are you optimistic, Randall? You've been in this location with Chautauqua Lake and Watershed Management now since 2016. You got 5 years under your belt. You're now the top dog. And as you look 5 years from now, are you optimistic?
Yeah, I can't help but be optimistic. 5 years is a long time. When you look back on our history, we're at about the 5-year mark, which is interesting, I guess. I think our evolution has been a very interesting progression, as just as we stress adaptive management in lake and watershed work. I think we too have to be very adaptive to changing conditions and also changing opportunities. The Jefferson Project, for example, if you had asked me in May of last year, would we be deploying vertical profilers and initiating this major undertaking, basically going from 0 to 60 in terms of lake research and data collection, I would have said that. I'm not sure if you got to attend, but in July we had what was called the Chautauqua Lake Water Quality Research Panel, and we had folks from the Jefferson Project, we had folks from SUNY Fredonia, we had folks from Bowling Green State University getting together and talking about the work that they had done, or in the case of the Jefferson Project, work that they had done at Lake George and the possibilities for Chautauqua. And within a month or within about 6 weeks, they were deployed. They were on the ground, putting sensors out, putting the profilers out, collecting samples from across the state, So as fast as that can happen, it's really hard to think about what might happen in a year's time or 2 years' time. And, COVID, we're all, hoping for a very different 2021. But, even there, we know that, while the needs may grow, the resources, there's a lot of very real ramifications that we're looking at for the next handful of years, in terms of funding opportunities and in terms of, a lot of things. But I think that makes that prioritization process all the more important, really trying to get down to the brass tacks of what's desired, what's doable, but what's the right blend to try to meet as many needs as we can with the extremely generous funding that we've been able to generate, but also with an understanding that it's finite, and it also could begin to show some of those delayed effects of the pandemic. And so I'm very optimistic. I think we've been provided a very big responsibility, and I hope that anybody that listens to me or has the time to talk to me, I hope they know that I take that responsibility very seriously, and I hope that comes across in the work that I do and the work that our team does. But I also know that the same passion, the same interpersonal dynamics that can fuel so many great collaborations, that friction and that stuff can cause some issues as well. So, figuring out the right way to work through that and not let that bleed over into those partnerships that are functioning, but rather figure out what's the way to keep building on that success so that we all can keep moving forward. Will we ever be in 100% lockstep amongst our membership or amongst stakeholders? That would be a very scary thing to think about if that ever were to happen. I think it would be quite an anomaly for anywhere. Here just the same as Northern Maine or wherever you may hail from, or any members of your audience may hail from. So again, figuring out how to keep that success going, how to build on it, how to learn lessons and apply those lessons learned to improvement, constant improvement. I think we'll be in a really good place in a year from now and 2 years from now. But, just like the lake is complex and the lake is never static, this alliance, these partnerships, they're not going to be static either. So it's one thing to set a 5-year plan, but then it's another thing to navigate that. So I'm very hopeful, yeah.
We've been very passionate, very gracious with your time. As I mentioned, encyclopedic in your knowledge of the Chautauqua Lake and Watershed Management Alliance, and I'm thrilled. Thank you for doing this, Randall. And do you have last word? Do you have anything you want to say to Taylor?
Thanks for all your hard work, Taylor, and thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate the chance to be here in the Jackson Center and to talk Chautauqua Lake. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
Great. Go Black Bears.